Today's cool fact of the day is that the concave glass surface of a 37-story skyscraper in London has actually melted the side mirrors of a Jaguar parked on the street below it, just from creating like a magnifying glass effect. Apparently, the way we teach Boy Scouts to fry an egg on the sidewalk works when you're building buildings. And this only happens a few times each year. And for some reason, I guess it always does it to Jaguars because it's London and they're from London. Anyway, kind of cool that buildings are cooking cars. Today's guest, and by the way, I should intro the show. This is Bulletproof Executive Radio. I'm Dave Asprey. But the cool thing here is today's guest is Dan Hurley. Dan has the distinction of being called a slow learner in third grade because he didn't know how to read. However, he is now someone who was taught by Spider-Man comics how to read and was published in the National Examiner. Dan, I did some really, I dug some real dirt up on you. Your first article was actually, I was attacked by Killer Bigfoot. Is this true?
That was my third article. My first article, for a national publication. It was back in 1970. It was back in 1980, and I was trying to figure out how to get started writing for national publications. And I was living in St. Louis, working as an editor, and it was the old "do what you can with what you have, where you are." And I heard some crazy local news reports and started pitching those stories to, the supermarket newspapers.
So you could break into the business. Well, you've come a long way.
That was my start.
If you look at the real reason you're on the show here is obviously not Bigfoot. It's because you just wrote Smarter, the new science of building brain power.
Yes.
So you've also been on Dr. Oz and NPR and CBS and you've increased your own fluid intelligence by 16%, and you've written for Neurology Today. So you're pretty much someone who's up to speed on how this stuff works.
I think so. I hope so.
Now, let's jump right into it for people who are, lots of them are driving today. What is fluid intelligence? How do you measure it?
Okay, so when people talk about smarts, oftentimes it's about knowledge and information that we know, but the question is, how do you get that knowledge and information? So one way is through hard work, but when everyone sits in class for the exact same amount of time, and if they all study for the exact same amount of time, they don't all get the same grades. They don't all learn as well. And that ability to learn, to understand things, to follow a conversation, to see into a matter is fluid intelligence. And this is the big thing that separates that crazy math genius from the guy who's smashing big rocks into little rocks.
So that's the measure of fluid intelligence, like how quickly you can absorb new information, or how quickly you can work with it. Okay.
Yes, and see to the heart of it. It's tested by psychologists through various basic, paper and pencil tests, but it's important to keep in mind that its usefulness is not some geeky-headed silly thing. It's the reason that, when you think of, well, how did Jeff Bezos see what was coming with books online and building a business? How did he get that ability to penetrate all the facts that all of us see and see the forest through the trees? And that kind of ability is a really precious commodity in business and in all facets of life.
It's something that's incredible, especially because you were able to change your fluid intelligence. How did you do that?
So until 6 years ago, psychologists who study intelligence all agreed that you cannot increase fluid intelligence. They had been trying for 100 years. They had done study after study after study. We've all heard of preschool as a way to help people. And here in New York, Bill de Blasio, the new mayor, wants universal preschool. So preschool is great. It helps a lot of things. But one thing it does not seem to really help is it doesn't seem to raise your intelligence. It doesn't raise your IQ score by much. Even though you've got that whole extra year of learning and getting prepared, somehow that doesn't seem to translate. And they've looked at all kinds of other things. So 6 years ago, this study came out in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, where they did what's called a working memory practice. Yep. So people, working memory is something that is very closely related to fluid intelligence. It's not quite the exact same thing. It's usually tested in these little 2-minute tasks that seem... a psychologist, one guy calls them these dippy little tasks that seem really pointless, but turn out to be really predictive of all sorts of other things. So instead of just taking it as a test to see how good you are, they had people practice at this thing. And after 5 weeks of a half hour a day of practicing, the people's fluid intelligence increased on average by 40%, which was a wild finding.
And this was what kind of work was causing that?
So it was it's a working memory task called the NBAC. If you go on a site called soakyourhead.com, it's there for free, and you can do it. It's so hard, it makes you want to throw your computer across the room. It's extremely demanding. You're seeing like imagine a tic-tac-toe board, and different items, different ones of the squares are lighting up. So this one lights up, that one lights up, this one lights up, that one lights up. And you're being asked first to remember to press a button every time the same one that lit up 2 times ago lights up again. That's 2 back. Then, if you master that, and that's pretty easy, remembering which one was 2 times ago.
Yep.
But then you get to 3 back, and you're constantly having to keep track of 3. Like it was here, it was there, it was there. Okay, now it was here, it was there, it was there. Then it just keeps shifting back and forth, and you're like, I can't follow it. And this ability to concentrate and zoom in turned out to be super useful. And there have been now dozens and dozens of studies that have found that doing these various working memory tasks seem to increase they increase just working memory, which is really, really useful. They've increased all kinds of skills from reading comprehension, math ability, everything really. It's quite an extraordinary thing, and the field of intelligence research has really caught fire ever since that study came out.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I've been doing a dual NBAC training with my executive coaching clients for about 3 years. It's something I wrote about on the site a while back.
How far are you up? How far along are you?
Well, I haven't done my own training in a while because, like you said, it's mentally painful. So
yeah, I got up to 5 back.
Yeah, I got up to 5 back also. I've seen studies that say it's stable even 10 years later. You probably saw that study.
Well, what's crazy is when I go on, I haven't done it like I did it very regularly for 3.5 months.
That's a long
time. And I got up to, I did it like 55 times over those 3.5 months. So I was, doing it like close to 5 days a week. Now when I do it a year later, I'm right back up to 5 back very quickly. It's strange. It's like riding a bike or something.
Those are the words that I was thinking. It is like riding a bike. I'll have to go back and see if I can still do 5. I hit 5 a few times. I wouldn't say I was that reliable on it. 4 was doable.
4 was doable.
Yeah.
I would get up to 5 and fall back to 4. I would get up to 5 and fall back to 4.
Okay, so we were in the same zone there.
Yes.
All right, now
yes.
here's a question for you then. You talk about 16% improvement in fluid intelligence.
Yep.
Are you talking about IQ there or something else?
So IQ is different than fluid intelligence. Most IQ tests include all sorts of things that, including a crystallized knowledge, like I took an IQ test and it included all kinds of word knowledge. Well, I'm a writer. I'm a professional writer. I've been a professional writer for 30 years. All I do is I sit around reading these damn books back here, and I'm a reader. I'm crazy. So of course I see your books too. So of course I know all those words. I mean, it'd almost be like asking a car mechanic about, where is the carburetor in a 1979 Buick, and they would, they know that instantly. And what is this piece of equipment? They know what that is, where I wouldn't know what that is. So to that degree, a regular IQ test it's such a mix of things. It's such a mutt of this, that, and the other, that most of these studies do not bother with an IQ test. First of all, they take a long time.
Yeah.
And they just include so much. Most fluid intelligence tests tend to be visual spatial for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why they have zoomed in on that, but a lot of them are these, the Ravens matrices is considered the gold standard. That's the one where you have 3 rows of 3, and you see a little triangle, a bigger triangle, biggest triangle, little circle, biggest circle, little square, bigger square. What's the last one? It should be a big square. But when you're at the 3rd one, they instantly become hard enough that, like a little child, a 10-year-old would start getting really confused. And by the 6th one, it's really pushing you. It's like, whoa, what is that? It begins to look like hieroglyphics. There's so much going on that and what it takes is careful attention. It takes a sort of systematic, careful attention. And you kind of have to go through. And it requires this weird thing of insight, right? So at some point, your mind needs to just go, oh, that's it, right? Mm-hmm. And that is hard to do when it gets hard. And that kind of pattern detection, I mean, when you think about it, that's what a little baby does when it's learning language. That's what we all do when we're driving and there's snow coming down and it's foggy and we're trying to see the road and like, I got to turn right here. It's pattern detection, which is really fundamental to intelligence and to making sense of the world.
So when you talk about increasing your fluid intelligence by 16%, you use the Ravens matrices.
The Ravens.
Okay, not an IQ test. Got it.
I took an IQ test. I went to Mensa, and because Mensa gives out free IQ tests, right? Anyone who wants to join. So I took Mensa thinking, gee, maybe at the end of this, my IQ will rise enough and I'll be a member. I could join. And what I was surprised to find was that I qualified just barely based on my first test.
Wow.
And then 3.5 months later when I took it again, I only went up a point.
Wow. So that it's funny when I did. So
my fluid intelligence increased. But what's interesting when you look at when I was looking at the IQ test that Mensa gives, a lot of it was like sort of math, the kind of math I could tell that if I restudied, if I sat
Yeah.
down for a high school equivalency, a GED prep program, just a simple 2 week, like, well, how do you do this and that and that?
Right.
I know I would have gone up way more on that Mensa IQ test, because there were just a bunch of goofy little math things that I just, I hadn't paid it, since high school, I haven't done that. So.
Right. And that's one of the problems with IQ tests in general, is that there's a testing effect. Like, you did it once, now you know it's on the test, so you would go back, and if you were going to take it again, you might brush up on your math skills. And
certainly the fact that I went up 16% on the Ravens, you could say, well, Dan, maybe you would have gone up 16% if you just took it twice without having done anything. That's certainly true. So, but the for scientifically, though, there have been nearly 100 of these studies published. My 6-year-old is coming in. Honey, I'm doing a... Yes, there she is. Okay.
That's okay. My 6-year-old has done that before, too.
Hello. See you later. See you later. Okay. Go downstairs with Annie. He's in... Where are you? Dave, where are you?
I'm in Canada, Victoria, British Columbia. Hi there.
He's in Canada. Say hi.
High five.
Okay.
How far is it?
That's many miles away. You need to go downstairs. I'm working. Bye.
How cute.
Oh, Lord. So, actually, we're going to be enrolling her in a working memory training program through something called CogMed.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah, that's the biggest. We've all heard of Lumosity, which is this, $15 a month thing for every man. They've got like 40 million people that have signed up for that.
I was on a panel with their chief scientist at South by Southwest a couple years ago on brain hacking. Really good people. I've been to their labs and all that. They really like it.
I have been there too. They are very good people. They're working very hard. They want it to work. They want it to help people. CogMed has more published research behind it. It started off as a research program, and for people who have like ADHD or are recovering from the effects of chemotherapy or anything like that, it seems like CogMed looks to be the most promising approach.
I've often thought of doing dual and back with my kids. They're 4 and 6, and I'm not quite sure it's time yet. I am certainly going to do neurofeedback with them once they're 8 or so, and they've developed a fully formed basic nervous system.
Yes.
So they can just gain, more ability to understand the limits and edges of what they're capable of at a young age. Cool. So they twirl around less,
Right.
Twirl around cognitively. I mean, they can twirl around all they want physically.
You can absolutely watch kids in this early age range as their working memory goes up. It's interesting. They are such remarkable learners at that age, and yet their ability to sit and look at a piece of paper and make sense of that pattern is very low, because they're just so everywhere that they can't attend in that manner. Even though, of course, we all know that they are able to learn new words and make sense out of what adults are saying and learn social cues so amazingly fast. I mean, you're never smarter at that fundamental level than you are as your first year of life. I mean, you're starting from scratch and gaining a vast body of knowledge with nothing to base it on.
The thing that kids that age seem to be able to do, obviously, if there's a bit of moving stuff on a screen, they lock in on it. So I have mine do the inner balance heart rate variability training. and it teaches you to breathe in slowly and breathe out slowly while you're
Yes.
staring at a screen and change your heart rate. And they can rock it on the first level. They immediately turn it to green and they keep it there. But it's really funny because once they learn that, you say, take a deep breath. And most kids just start panting when you tell them to take it. But they actually do a deep breath like the way they learned with feedback. So the loops are so fresh for their brains. I love watching kids learn it. It's awesome. Well, all right. So we're talking about IQ tests. So I was concerned about the testing effect, and I was trying to tell if my own dual in-back experiments had paid off. So I did one form of IQ test. I don't recall which one right now. This was going back like 4 years, maybe 3 years. But I did one, and then I did another equivalent style of test where you could match them up on standardized tests to see where you were, but you wouldn't get a testing effect. And my second score was 12 points higher than my first score, which was kind of cool. One of the people in my company with me had 18 points, which is astounding. Yes. And again, like how much of that was luck, how much of it was sleep, because your intraday variability of IQ varies too, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, the only way we know this, I mean, none of us would take any pill sold, whether a pharmaceutical or a dietary supplement, based just on how does it make us feel. Because, if you take a statin drug or an aspirin, well, an aspirin, you kind of learn, it makes it hurt less.
Right.
But most pills, most things that we do, we don't know, and it's only based on a large study. And that's where these 100 or so studies that have been published, and it's been building up so quickly. When I finished my research, I had 75 randomized clinical trials that have been published in peer-reviewed literature that, the vast majority showing significant benefits. And in just like 8 months, there's been another 25 studies published. It's really gaining speed. So the field is on fire.
It is on fire, and part of what I'm working on with the Bulletproof Executive is helping people see that there's a bunch of research that they're not going to hear about at the doctor's office about these sorts of things, and that some things that we didn't think were possible, using both like the power of data analysis, where we couldn't do data collection analysis enough, and just the power of feedback tools like dual in-back, where right away, did I get it right? Did I not get it right? We can do things that you could never do 50 years ago. It was just unthinkable.
Absolutely. I think, anyone who is interested in improving their abilities, Lumosity is inexpensive. I know a lot of their games are working memory games. There's a vast literature showing that is real, that it's beneficial. But that's just, and if you have, for instance, if you have, if someone who's had a traumatic brain injury, if you have a child that you're learning, maybe you're concerned that they're ADHD, someone who's recovering from radiation chemotherapy from cancer, I think CogMed is a very, there is a lot of research supporting it. Some skeptics continue to doubt it, but I think it's, I see studies going on in leading medical, hospitals all around the world. It's really considered a credible approach. But for my book, I looked at all kinds of methods. I looked at physical exercise, which is absolutely probably the single best proved method. And one thing that most of these methods that I looked into all have in common is that you've got to be progressively getting better. It's not enough to just, I've been a jogger like my whole life. I've been a reader my whole life. So me just reading and jogging is not going to move me up. Where I joined a boot camp exercise program and really was out there three mornings a week, killing myself just about. And I think that contributed as much as the working memory games.
Well, it increases your BDNF, which is something necessary to increase your brain function, right?
Absolutely. And, it seems that weight training strength training is something that really helps. And what's great about all of these things is they are progressive. As you get stronger, it gets harder, so you just keep going. And it's that gaining process where the real benefit seems to come in. I think another thing is if, people say, oh, well, I do Sudoku, or, oh, I do crosswords, or I'm playing Tetris. We all, like here in the New Jersey, New York, Connecticut area, if you get on a bus or a train, you inevitably walk by someone who's playing Tetris on their phone, right?
Yep.
And I just think if that person was just doing a working memory task, this would actually be literally making them smarter while they're having some fun. Chess is another game where it gets harder as you get better, and it requires a lot of brain power. And you could get a teacher who helps you start learning new strategies and really pushes you to grow there. Music, learning a musical instrument. I should have had my lute available here. I learned to play the Renaissance lute. There's a number of good studies showing that learning to play an instrument is really great. Not just picking up your guitar and playing the old Beatles songs or, the Grateful Dead, but actually learning a new instrument. And again, it's the learning and growing and getting better at something where the gain really seems to come in.
So the idea of constantly pushing for hormesis, this idea of something was hard, so you had to learn to do it better.
Yes.
It's interesting because you're a pretty well-traveled brain hacker, because you've also tried the racetam family of nootropics, right? Well,
the only drug that I took, really, aside from coffee, which, drink more, get smarter. And coffee actually has a ridiculous number of benefits. But nicotine, and this will sound very bad to most people. There, he's running away. Don't.
I'll just grab mine while you grab yours.
Oh, no.
No, I love it, man. Tell us.
I don't smoke. I'm not a tobacco user, but I don't think it's definitely not healthful, tobacco. But nicotine alone as a patch, or if you want to use the gum, but what do you got there? What is this?
I have the 2 milligram lozenges that don't have bad sweeteners in them.
Oh wow, 2 milligram.
Yeah, it absorbs more through the gum.
Does that come on?
It comes on really fast. I actually break them in half. I use 1 milligram where you'd put chewing tobacco in the mouth. And
interesting.
I really feel it. I've used the patches too. They're really good for weight loss too.
Well, so the patch, what I found was, like, I was afraid that I would feel like nauseated, like lightheaded and all that.
Yeah.
And I just took the 7 milligram patch. I felt absolutely nothing. Yeah. I couldn't tell that I had it on.
It's subtle.
In fact, it was beyond subtle. It literally, it was not like coffee. It was like nothing.
Yeah.
And yet, at the end of the day, when I, was getting undressed, and I went, oh, I wore my patch today. And then I thought and went, oh, wow, I had a really productive day. So, I think it's something that someone should talk to their doctor about. But it is available over the counter, and there is a great deal of research. I have an article in the March issue of Discover magazine. There's another one that's, if you look up my name and nicotine, You'll see it online.
That's Dan Hardy Nicotine. If you're listening to this,
Hurley, Hurley, Dan Hurley.
Did I say it wrong? Hurley.
Hurley.
Sorry, I pronounced it wrong, but I know it Hurley, like the surfboard company, right? There you go.
But so nicotine definitely has. The Michael J. Fox Foundation is supporting a study of nicotine for people with Parkinson's.
Wow.
Because this is how they first started noticing nicotine, because in the 60s, when they were doing all those studies to show how bad it was, they were basically like looking, okay, you're a smoker, you're a non-smoker. And they did these massive studies with, literally hundreds of thousands of people. Britain did them, the U.S. did them, and they would kind of go through giant data sets. And it makes your breathing worse. It gives you lung cancer. It gives you this cancer, the other cancer. It does everything bad for you. It causes heart attacks. And then they went, whoa, wait a minute. You have half the risk of developing Parkinson's. And
wow.
it kind of freaked them out, and they thought it was a mistake. And then they did more studies, and they've now absolutely concluded that it has some sort of preventive effect on Parkinson's. And even when people who have Parkinson's take nicotine, these pilot studies have shown a benefit for their movement disorders. And so, because there's nicotinic receptors in your brain.
Yes.
So...
This is awesome. I love it that you're actually using the patch for that. When I've used many smart drugs, the non-stimulating ones, so you can feel coffee, you can feel Provigil, but the ones that are more like the aniracetams or the piracetam family, you don't really feel it when you take them. But then when you stop taking them, like, wait a minute, I just had to reach for a word, and I haven't reached for a word in a week.
That's funny. Yeah.
When you enhance your performance, it feels so natural, like that's how you should have been, that you notice the lack of enhancement more so than the enhancement, because it's like it's a glove that just fits. Have you felt this in your own experiments, or is this just me?
I definitely felt with the nicotine patch. It was, it really took a while because I was doing so many things at once. It was a little hard to figure out, well, which one is really helping me? For instance, when I would do the exercise, I'd be kind of exhausted afterward. And here she comes again. Okay. Look what she made at school.
Awesome.
Because it's Valentine's Day tomorrow. Okay, dear.
How cute.
Love you. Okay, we'll see you later. It's
evening time for you out in New Jersey, so I get it. You'll be off the podcast before bedtime, so that's good.
So, it was hard to tell what was what, but definitely the first time I noticed it was when I had a really productive writing day, and I got home, and then when I got undressed, I went, oh, I put on the patch today, because I didn't always remember to put it on, and it really was striking how my writing just flowed that day, and I hadn't even remembered that I was wearing it. So I don't think it was a placebo. I think it absolutely had an effect.
There's a reason that so many of the world's famous artists and writers are smoking and drinking black coffee for hours on end when they're doing their writing. Those are two of the world's oldest smart drugs.
Absolutely, positively, and everything else that's out there. The U.S. military would love to find things that could really help pilots, soldiers. Because they're routinely in these situations where they cannot go to sleep, and they've got to perform at the highest possible level, or they get killed. So there's the ultimate motivation. And really, nicotine and coffee, it is very hard to find anything that produces a better effect without making you slightly paranoid. or delusional.
It's bad when you have
because there's
bombs.
a lot of these other drugs have weird effects.
Yeah.
They really do. And for instance, you could give someone speed and they would stay up and be like, yeah, I'll do it, sure. But they found that back in Vietnam, they found absolutely that when you gave those drugs to soldiers, they end up turning around and shooting their fellow soldier who's coming back from the latrine. So it's really not a helpful thing.
It's something a lot of people don't know, but in World War II, the U.S. and allies actually set up coffee roasters near the front lines so they could roast coffee beans. That was part of the military strategic supply. And even like the Civil War and the War for Independence in the U.S., coffee was a major strategic component that they tracked like bullets.
Oh, yes.
That's shocking and cool at the same time.
That's crazy. What they definitely did not have was another thing that I did is transcranial direct current stimulation, which is...
Are you trained in mind reading? Because you were talking about military and you talked about TDCS. Like, I love this. You're so on the ball. Okay, tell us.
The TDCS, I had an article a couple months ago. Thank you.
I tried it. It's good.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Excuse me. Yes.
Kids are great. Yep.
Okay. So
TDCS.
TDCS is the best thing that the military has ever found for improving the ability of soldiers to maintain focus for a long time and to persevere at a difficult, boring task. People, for instance, the controllers in airports who have to, the air control tower people, they're looking at a computer monitor, and people's lives are at stake. But you do that for 8 hours and you get pretty burned out.
Yeah.
So and we all know that. We all know that when it's one thing to be working on a report for an hour. It's another thing to have that report and it's 3 a.m. and you're not done yet, and you've got to hand it in the morning. And being able to do that accurately with the same level of attention. So TDCS, transcranial direct current stimulation, looks like a major breakthrough. Unfortunately, it's only available in research studies. People have been doing it by themselves. And
like me.
You've been doing it by yourself?
For about, a little bit more than 3 years now, using the iontophoresis machines. But they have the new video gaming focus device, which is finally consumer grade. I can't make mine work, but I got one. But I use the old medical grade stuff. You've tried it yourself?
I did it at Harvard's neurostimulation laboratory. And, I just am too much of a scaredy cat to do it on myself. Because, it's your brain and it's electricity. And I don't want to see, it's like, it's alive and bolts of lightning coming out. I know it's extremely low dose. There's hundreds of studies now that make it look super effective for all kinds of things, including depression and for stroke survivors and improving math ability, language ability, like seemingly everything. It's really striking.
I'm trying it out. I use it. I'm learning to be good at archery. So I go once or twice a week to shoot arrows, and I put electrodes on my head, trying to hide them under a hat. And I'm actually doing stimulation while I'm developing the muscle memory to learn how to target the arrows. The problem is, how do you split test that? I have no idea how I can prove that it helped or didn't help. You'd need a study for that. But
basically you have to have faith in these studies that say that it does work. I would wonder, though, if you're doing it to yourself, because the placement of it, like here versus here, where on the brain should it be, is so varied for different conditions and things you're trying to target that I'd be like, I wouldn't know how to do that.
There's definitely a black art to it, and I'm sort of looking left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex because that's basically on the forehead above your left eyebrow, an inch or two. Because that's where the most studies have been. But I probably should. I've also tried it over the language processing center over here, and I still think that when people say French or Swedish to me, it sounds like someone chewing gum. I don't parse the words right, and it's a brainstem issue for me, and it drives me nuts. I'm trying to hack that one, but that's been a difficult one for me because the sounds don't enter my brain the way they enter my ear.
Yes.
So I don't know if electricity is going to fix that, but I'm willing to try it. All right. Let's switch gears for a minute here because you're known for another book, Diabetes Rising.
Yes.
You got type 1 diabetes.
Yes, I do.
How did this happen, and why did you write a book about it?
Oh, well, type 1 diabetes, how does it happen? Researchers don't know how it happens. There is a definite genetic component, and most people would assume that it's mostly genetic. In fact, it's mostly not genetic because it runs very weakly in families where type 2 diabetes, the kind that people get when they're overweight and as they get older, runs very heavily in families. So actually type 1 is far less genetic than type 2. And my book basically explored why type 1, which most people don't know, type 1 is growing just as fast as type 2 is. So there are children now getting it at 6 months of age, at 1 and 2, where typically the age used to be like around 11, 12. I got it at age 18. Usually it's during some point in adolescence or just before, as sort of the stress of growing puts more stress on your pancreas, and then finally you kick over and you're diabetic. So there's a bunch of things that seem to cause type 1 diabetes. Lack of exposure to sunshine.
The vitamin D connection?
Presumably vitamin D. But definitely people, the farther north you live, the more likely you are to develop it. The risk in high sunshine places, you just basically go up Europe, up the United States, and the risk goes up.
And it goes up more for people with dark skin, right?
Yes, it does. So,
which could be vitamin D related because they make less vitamin D.
It's absolutely, there's, we presume it's vitamin D. I mean, I now take vitamin D, and it's sensible to assume that, but it could be something else about the sunshine. It remains a little mysterious. There's all sorts of other things going on. The same increased height and weight that is leading people to develop type 2 is also seems to be playing a role with type 1. The exposure to environmental contaminants definitely seems to be playing some kind of role.
In the weird biohacker world that I live in, I've looked at type 1 diabetes and autoimmunity, and since people with type 1 diabetes often get more Hashimoto's, more celiac disease, and the other autoimmune diseases, I'm looking at environmental factors that trigger autoimmune attacks on the different parts of the body.
Yes.
And I've even zoomed in on some common ones just because I have enough autoimmune conditions against my nervous system and against my joints and my brain and things like that. They're all manageable and hackable, but I suspect that's part of it. How far into your book? I haven't read your diabetes book yet, but I'm now interested. How far into the autoimmune side?
The autoimmune is definitely a part of it. Okay. And there's this thing called the hygiene hypothesis, that the environment that we live in now is so clean and free of exposure to the pathogens that we all grew up with. So 100 years ago, almost everybody, or 150 years ago, certainly, basically everybody had intestinal worms, right? And we were exposed to all sorts of things that, unfortunately, killed a lot of people. So you, generally speaking, would say, isn't it great that we've made our world nice and healthy and clean? Sure, that sounds great. Except the catch is that our immune system was designed to fight all those things. And without all those things, it seems like our immune system, the theory is, and there's a lot of research into this, that your immune system goes a little crazy, goes a little hyper because it doesn't have anything to attack, so it starts attacking the body. And one of the things it appears to possibly attack is the pancreas, resulting in type 1. So, during my research, there's a great deal of type 1 diabetes up in the Boston suburbs. And I went to this one town where there's a really remarkable increase. And it happens to actually be located very near to Thoreau's Walden Pond. And sitting there at Walden Pond, like I went by and visited, and I went, wow, so all of these things that are increasing diabetes basically did not exist when Thoreau was around. And another one of them is just being outside more, because he was outside so much that even though there's less sun exposure up in the Boston area compared to Miami, you're outside so much that you're getting enough vitamin D. And there weren't environmental contaminants. He certainly was exposed to the usual pathogens. In fact, the poor guy died of tuberculosis. And people were far thinner back then. So all of these things that are going on in our modern world, right there on Walden Pond, you could see that people did not have to deal with that.
I'm intrigued. I think I'm going to have to read your diabetes book too. It's fascinating to see what's triggering all of this. And the hygiene hypothesis is one where I looked at my own gut issues. I actually took pig whipworm eggs in order to give myself a parasite.
I considered doing that. I was ready to order them. And there's all these studies actually. Yeah. It's really funny that you say that, because there's studies. They've been doing it in animals, and they are just starting it in humans. It's, there are things with the immune system and that kind of, taking intestinal parasites to drink that down, that seem crazy to us. But then, you have to remember that 150 years ago, everyone knew that bloodletting was a great way to treat a disease, and would have thought that surgery was like murder. I mean, when people started doing surgery, they were thought to be like just the side of witches and warlocks. So there's just so much and there's, in fact, they've been able to cure a version of Crohn's disease in some people by having them take a pill that has the poop of another person who is healthy, which is very freaky.
Fecal transplants are sort of
gross.
Oh
my God. It's incredible, but
I would do it, but I don't know whose poop I want. So that seems like an open question.
I don't want to find out.
Yeah, same problem here. It's been fascinating, Dan, to be able to talk about such a wide range of topics. You are, as far as I can tell, an old school biohacker, and that you've looked at all these different aspects of, the human body and what it can do and why it does what it does. And I really appreciate your work. It's really cool.
Great. Well, I hope people, it's the book is Smarter, The New Science of Building Brain Power. It's out there on Amazon and in your local bookstore, and support the local bookstore.
We'll include a link to it so people can find the name and all that. And I agree, support your local bookstore. And there's a question that everyone answers on the podcast at the end.
What?
Your top 3 recommendations for people who want to perform better throughout everything in life. So it doesn't have to be from any of your books, but the wisdom you've accumulated in all of your studies and all of your learnings. Top 3 most important thing for someone who just wants to perform as well as they can.
The main thing that I found out from doing all of these things is you have to spend time doing things you suck at.
Yes.
And by that, what I mean is when I learned to play the lute, when I joined, and I'm a pretty decent like guitar player. I used to be in a band and such, but learning to play the lute was, it's a little humiliating because you really immediately don't know what you're doing. And joining this boot camp exercise class, I have never been a jock. This was like military style exercise, and everybody in this group is a fanatic. So I'm there like Mr. Goofball, trying to keep up and totally unable to keep up. And when I'm doing these working memory things, I tried mindfulness meditation, which is another thing.
Yeah.
And all of these things, you are submitting yourself to doing something that you're not good at. And most of us, most adults like to do things that they're great at. And we take a lot of pride in achieving some, mastery over something. And I think the fun part here, and it doesn't have to be humiliating, it can be fun. I've personally found it really like inspiring, and I felt more alive because I was doing all these things that I thought I couldn't do and that didn't seem like my kind of thing. And it's really enlivening to open yourself up to that kind of new experience and dive into something that is challenging and makes you feel like a beginner again.
Wow. So that's one. We've got two more. Or was that two?
Well, I think that's where all of these things that I did. So, I would encourage people to try a challenging physical thing, physical exercise thing that they've never done before to increase their fitness level. I would encourage people to try some of these working memory games, whether they go at soakyourhead.com, Lumosity, CogMed. You could read other ones that I describe in the book.
Sure.
And learning a musical instrument, is really fun and cool. And even if you think you're terrible, getting and I think it should be, not just picking up your old instrument and doing it again, but actually taking a lesson like you did back when you were 9 years old, and the teacher is there. Doing these things, none of them are directly related to your work, but they all will pay off, and they're going to bring a level of enthusiasm back to you. And these are the things that when we were young, everything we did was new and exciting, and like we had never done it before. And I think everybody needs some of that in their life, no matter how old they are.
That is fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that kind of advice. This is
absolutely.
It's one of the reasons people listen to the podcast. So you've been just an amazing interview. Totally appreciate your time, and have an awesome evening with your little girl.
Okay. Now I'll go eat the piece of cookie that she made for me.
Hi, David. Thanks so much. Gosh, I'm so excited to share with you anything and everything you want to know about skin, healthy skin, and any kind of ways to enhance that aging process. Because I'm right there with you, Dave. I'm 52 this year, and so I'm like constantly looking at what can we do to make it healthier.
Without counting calories or using exercise, I lost 100 pounds and I've kept it off for 10 years. I raised my IQ by more than 20 points. I lowered my biological age, and I learned how to thrive on a lot less sleep.